We'll stop on the way back either. We can stop at Jimmy Smith's and tear his house down, or stop at Rachel's, or go to the Apple Festival. Again, to give you a possible multi-sensual input to all this that time seems fragmented. Tonight, the general reading topics will be covering. How do you like I'm going to say what it's covering, now I got to stand here and figure out what to put? No. So what can I make up? All right. It will be covering, believe it or not, again, the mind, consciousness, noise, and a little of, amongst other things. Three brothers were discussing a certain matter, and the first one said, "What is the worst characteristic of noise?" To which the second one replied, "Its volume." And they all pondered this for a bit, then the second one tried again, "Its repetition." And again they all considered this possibility, and the first brother tried his hand at answering his own question. "No, surely it is its ceaselessness." And the third sibling, in his non-participation in the discussion, displayed what they all sought but did not yet realize. Thoughts. The thing you think about when there's nothing better to think about. My writers and I had great faith in that one. It was sort of a litmus test. It sometimes rains on mystical warriors, and it sometimes doesn't, just like with everyone else. But it also sometimes rains mystical rain on these warriors, and sometimes doesn't, which is not at all the case with everyone else. Noise has its own memory, and your consciousness is it. Here is one out-of-the-way fellows, out of the routine description of a certain out-of-the-ordinary adventure. Quoting, "Everyone starts off in about the same place, and everyone ends up more or less in the same place. But somewhere just a little past the middle of the trip, things just seem to all fly apart. Let's see the oil companies get that on a map small enough to fold up and carry in the car. Now for some environmental news. The world's mystic population is kept in check in three main ways. One is that you can't be talked into being one, and two is that you can't even be tricked into being one, and thirdly is the fact that even if you want to be one, it's still almost impossible." One man finally thought, "For all of the command I have over my mind, it might as well be under control of some outside force." He later wasn't sure if he was glad he'd thought of this or not. At the time, for the Siamese twins segment of the program, they ascended the dais, adjusted the microphone, and the first one spoke. Rather than describing, as some have done, those struggling for a greater level of consciousness as explorers, knights, adventurers, and warriors, I simply call them mighty produce clerks. And why not, added his brother. A man writes the Dear Doctor advice column. "Dear Doctor, I have squirrels in my attic." "Dear sir," he replied, "welcome to the club." The Hall of Justice on one foreign world bore the inscription, "Only fools try to figure things out." One man who, for many years, had been on the wondrous, extraordinary, kind of unusual mystical path, thought to himself, at least when I was back marching along with my fellow cityites, it was possible to accept failure as actually being success. But just look at things now. A certain father told his son, "If you talk too much, you won't hear what's said." And the lad went off and thought on this for a while. And taking into account the type of info his father usually passed along, returned to him and said, "Knowing you, what you told me wasn't really about talking and listening between people, was it? But about what takes place inside the consciousness of one individual. There's no relationship like that of a father to a child, particularly when they're one and the same." One man said, "I'll shut up if you will," and replied, "Who are you talking to?" and said, "Oh no, here we go again." Ooh, out of order, out of order. God, our day is ruined, right? Nine, 10, 11. I know it's really hard when you break the rhythm of the way it's rolling along and everybody right in step. Let me survey what damage, if any, has been did. The Hall of Justice on one foreign world board in the inscription, only fools try to figure things out. Even shadows make noise when they're in your head. A father said to his son, "Don't be fooled by what they say. Men could be anything they can describe wanting to be just by being more alert. Those within a system never benefit from certain knowledge they have of the system. E.g., Christians don't profit from their professed knowledge that no one can seem to actually be one. The structure of collective human existence is such that even those proclaiming themselves freethinkers, radicals, and reformers will stick to working within existing systems in their professed attempt to bring about change and positive expansion rather than striking out totally on their intellectual own. Glutinous maximizing. It is the tendency of cows to stick to the herd. These are the ones that got out of place. Okay. One man said, I know, we'll pick it up here, "I'll shut up if you will," and replied, "Who are you talking to?" and said, "Oh no, here we go again." Comparing what you've achieved to the position of others is the way of the ordinary and the crippled mystic. A viewer writes, "Several generations of our family gather to watch your show each week. And recently, when you noted that what ordinarily passes for progress in life is simply men correcting mistakes they've made and repairing damage they'd previously done, I noticed in reaction to this, my daughter's eldest boy gave an immediate, near-sneering laugh. And then I had to ask myself, but what other kind of, quote, progress is possible within a closed system? My grandmother, what big questions you have. And good ones, too. Then perhaps you'd care to consider it in this manner. If ordinary thoughts actually bore any intelligence, they wouldn't be so repetitive, now would they? One man said, "It's too noisy in here," and his stomach said, "Are you talking to me?" And he replied, "I'm still not sure." FYI, This is the same gent who sometime previously engaged in a similar internal conversation, but with a different organ. And then yet another chap wrote to Dear Doctor. Dear Doctor, went the letter, I have beavers in my basement. And Dear Sir, went the doctor's reply, get with the guy with squirrels in his attic. If man were not so internally connected, if man was not so internally connected, he'd be disconnected. And he wouldn't be man. The son of a mighty hunter had long dreamed of capturing a certain wondrous, elusive creature that few had ever even seen. And one day came to his father and asked, in my quest to grasp this mysterious beast, should I apply my attention and efforts to its head or to its feet? And the elder replied, this is the question to which all true trackers ultimately arrive. Some followers of a certain mystic began to fear that he might not know much since he didn't say much. So, responded he, yeah, but at least I don't tell you personal anecdotes or the history of how I learned what I do know, and those who knew anything forgot about it. Meanwhile, in a professional mystic school in another city, an instructor was just telling the class, if at any given moment you don't know what you're talking about, make up a new term for it. Also, for those of you truly interested in the working relationship between man's mind and words, consider this. In a certain reality at an angle from yours is a world on which the Bowie knife was named after Jim Knife. What stops me from scratching where I itch, thought one man, but some noise and distraction. One secret tradition says that man is but a franchise of a foreign corporation. Well, that is, his mind is. The son of a great explorer, who for many years had wanted to visit an extraordinary land he had heard of, finally approached his father and asked, does study, planning, and desire count for aught in ultimately realizing such travel? And the elder softly and solely responded, after all my years of experience, after all of my successes and failures, I too still wonder. How life goes in man from the neck up. Chapter, you don't really want to know what number we're up to. The ceaseless run of ordinary thought substitutes an ordinary man for greater consciousness. I say, Holmes, whoever said that life abhors a vacuum must have surely peered into the mind of man. One guy's in charge of making quotes. The second guy's in charge of explaining them. Everyone else is in charge of getting them. The first two guys is all there is. As he passed through his life, one guy kept repeating, a man can only do what's possible. A man can only do what's possible, without any inquiry as to the source of man's sense of the impossible. Those who do not believe that mechanical talk and cliches have a purpose are badly mistaken. Noise can blind the sight of certain lighthouses. In the beginning of his mystic journey, one man carried a stopwatch, but soon switched over to an annual calendar, then later to a monthly reminder, and then to a weekly listing, and later to a daily record. He now says he's ready to return to the stopwatch, assuming the operational reality of the calendar doesn't overtake him again. When you're traveling in the unknown, it's hard to judge time. In one lifetime, what everyone else called consciousness, mystics called noise. And finally tonight, this item. One man wanted to put a switch on his. Could I return your attention back to something we were talking about some nights ago, the matter of control? I pointed out that that would be one of the ways in which you could distinguish man if you were just taking some sort of offhand survey of this planet and you looked at other creatures and you weren't real particular having to sit for a zoology or biology exam, that if you looked around man, one of the singular characteristics would be that man seeks control. No other creature seeks control, they just simply seek to survive. You could even make an argument that if there is any control, it's the environment controlling them. That is, the not I of a lion actually controls it as to whether it survives or not, because it's not learned how to freeze food, to prepackage it, open up fast food restaurants. It merely lives or dies by what a casual glance would say is almost serendipity. Then you have the matter of man attempting to, and to a singular degree again, of success, controlling the environment, at least manipulating it. That's sort of where we left off. Now let me try another sideways run at the same general area. That once man has an operating intellect, one of the first things he desires is control. And shortly thereafter, what becomes his supreme subject of owning control is the intellect itself. Should I repeat that and try and make more grammatical sense? Why bother? Remember, I was trying to bring you up to speed that man seeks control. There's no doubt about that. There's nothing strange or metaphysical about that observation. That by seeking control is the only way that we've become civilized. It's the only way that we're taping this. It's the only way that we're standing here with clothes on and automobiles outside, freezers at home. Nowadays, not just freezers for food, but you have computers, you have freezers of information, ways to go store information. We now, to astounding degrees, anytime you're thinking that man doesn't deserve much but a good old cheer from the Bronx, to think about, he is to the point now of doing astounding things as far as control. We can we can control, relatively speaking, death compared to even a generation ago. Those of you that are still within a 2-generation family setting somewhere, you've got grandmothers or grandfathers that their life expectancy, even here in this country, was 20 years less than it is now. And the whole idea of transplanting organs, which is unbelievable. So to some degree, we could say that man has reached such a state of control that some of it is becoming almost a matter of ennui. Space exploration. To the point now they someone will ask the rhetorical question, what's happened to us? Are we losing our edge of curiosity? Are we going to lose our place in the forefront of technology on this planet? What happened? We were on the verge of putting men on Mars, etc. And then someone will answer, well, we changed our fiscal priorities, and etc., etc. Is there some way you can go to school to major in trying to go from one place to another and drag people all the way around somewhere? But see, you're supposed to do that yourself, is why I have to do it. You haven't lost your place. I'm always nice and say that. It is almost, I wanted you to get a picture, an operational picture, a diving board verbally, that man has reached a plateau of such control over the environment that in certain ways it has almost reached a self-serving or self-defeating or self-regulating level. Is that they say, well, we're not doing space exploration. Space are people of vested interest, officials of NASA will say, well, it's because the Congress will not allot us any more money. But I could point out that things go in a certain way, and it's almost as though man has such control, you kind of lose interest. How much better can automobiles be? They're not near the hobby they used to be even a generation ago. At any rate, the point of all that wasn't anything specific. It was to get you to see that after man exercises a certain kind of control in general over the environment, is what it means, he then turns. It has happened historically, collectively, and it's happened in certain individuals. What happens in all civilized individuals, they do not recognize or name it correctly, but in people such as you will assume an instance such as this, it is more specific. That is, the control over the environment. Control always being in quotation marks, of course, because it's all relative, because you can't control death. But it's to the point that we down there do compared to other animals. That's what I want you to understand is the kind of success man has had in the area of control, which only comes from here. Man does not control the environment due to his strength. If that was it, then elephants would be running the earth. Elephants would have had air conditioning before men ever showed up here. Man does not exercise control over the world, over the environment, through strength, through speed, through anything physical. From here and here only. And I just wanted you to see it's to the point now that, well, modern, civilized, ordinary people on this planet, life in certain areas has almost become boring. Which again, if you want to take a long cut going from, say, St. Louis to Minneapolis, we'll stop off just for a second in Oklahoma City. I would point out that if you notice, I'm not saying, but there's now common agreement, apparently, that crime, urban civilized crime, is taking a great upswing. It kind of gets boring when you don't have to do anything. Even if you personally have not controlled the environment, if you now live in Oklahoma City, everyone else collectively has controlled the environment now to such a degree. Life is so civilized that you can almost be born and do nothing to coast the rest of your life. If not living off welfare and food stamps, you can go down and hold up somebody. And many times nowadays, people in large urban areas are so busy that you can mug somebody and they won't even bother to report it. I mean, they was on the way to a big deal, and all you did was take their credit cards, maybe $20 in cash, and they immediately report the credit card, and they didn't even have time to fool with it. So in a sense, crime is not only successful, that is anti-civilized behavior in that sense, but it's in a way that I wasn't going into, but here we are, a kind of reaction to such control over life that it's not much of a challenge. And when you do not have a challenge, you end up, of course, bored. And to keep from being bored, you will stimulate yourself, and normally it comes out in ways that are regressive. It is simply, it has nothing to do with environment, it has nothing to do with social standing, it has nothing to do with crime. It has to do with the nature of the physical universe. A polarized energy running a three-dimensional world, including Oklahoma City, believe it or not, it is a three-dimensional city. It is control over the environment to such a degree, the world out there, by and large, that man collectively now, some night if any of you think you're really getting sharp, I'm going to have to go into this. Because things move at a collective rate, but they also move simultaneously in a parallel and yet separate manner individually. That is, collectively, man is to the point now, civilized man is one reason I use the term civilized, to the point that civilized man himself is very close just to being unchallenged due to the control that he has collectively, remember collectively, over the environment. Collectively now, because remember, you may not participate. Doesn't mean that you're educated and you're helping invent new technology or even supporting it. You're just here in the midst of it. You're in a parade and you're carried right along. So it's happened historically. Let's say that it's taken thousands of years and it's still going on, millions of years. But also in one person's lifetime, it's replayed out. That you started out in the environment, you have no control. You're a baby, you're just, in a sense, reliving the evolution of man, but you got no control, and then part of becoming an adult is that you seem to have some control, or else you are now in the mainstream of the parade of life, and you benefit therefrom. That you can just get wedged in between the adults and those actually carrying life, and just kind of take your feet off the ground and you'll be carried. So collectively, it's already happened. It's been happening. It didn't just happen last week, last month. It didn't just happen in the time of Athens. It's been happening. And it happens in the individual life. That is the ultimate aim, the ultimate desire for man intellectually. Remember, it's got to be from the intellect. That's where the desire for control came from. That is where the ability to control the environment, in quotation marks, control the environment, that is where it came from. But then the supreme challenge, the supreme desire of the intellect, well, of man, let's play with words so that you get the point. The supreme desire of man, once the intellect is inflamed, ignited, operational, will eventually become the desire to control the intellect. Now we're getting somewhere, right? He's picked the one thing that is, let's see, how shall I put this? Can you spell impossible? I got the I. No, that was 14. That was 11. Did I convolute and conflux it too much? In humanity, you can see this as being just one quick but inclusive detailing of the history of humanity. Just glance across it. It has been the history of him more and more exercising control over the environment. That is, and by environment, you people know I don't mean anything in the technical, touchy sense nowadays. By the environment, I mean the difference between the thing of I plus not I equals reality. And it's the I of man's intellect is exercising control over the not I part. No, and that's what I'm calling the environment. I don't mean anything in the environmental movement sense. But that he apparently can manipulate and have some control over out there. He can make water run, he can make it cold inside a structure when outside it's hot, and vice versa. He can make food last, whereas used to it would not. He can do all of these things, which is a controlled environment, and makes from the level of consciousness, from the intellect down, it has made this almost a fait accompli. If you're born in the midst of the civilized middle of the bell curve in the parade, as I said, you can almost lift your feet off and be carried right along. You will benefit therefrom. The control is all persuasive now in the civilized world, in the sane middle-class world. Then, it is always a matter that the intellect turns in one direction, without doubt. It's called many things, but once you see it, it's quite clear. Its supreme challenge, the thing that it's been headed for all this time, is to control itself. This gives rise to religion, philosophy. It is, in fact, the cornerstone of civilization. That's harder to see, but let's take religion and philosophy, that sort of thing. What is man? If we take religion, as you people should be able to do, and take out the denominational, sectarian, ordinary definition and comprehension of what religion is, it is like the highest clarion call of the civilized march of man. And I know they use terms about spiritual, etc. We all know that. But what they are doing is trying to exercise control over the intellect itself, which is what I was pointing out last time, and let a father note it to his kid tonight in one of the news items. All these stories about how difficult it would be to be a true Muslim, that nobody can measure up to it, or a Christian. If we just take being a Christian would be treat your neighbor as yourself. Use that. If that's it, and people say, well, we can't do it. Christians say it. People who profess that my aim in life is to be a Christian. That is what keeps me alive, keeps me sane, is the church, is trying to be a Christian. But they also profess, well, nobody can be one. And they'll give you reasons until you want to call up Oklahoma City and see what time they're having some sort of parade. They'll drive you crazy. They've got an infinite number, not Christians, but humanity. Life has an infinite number of reasons within a closed system. You can't get out of it, of why they can't do it. And I point out that, don't listen to that. If you can sit in a certain way, you can do it. The only thing lacking is attention, control. They can say, well, I try to love my fellow man, and then, I don't know, just something will happen. Somebody will say something before I know it. I'll try and go, what the hell, don't push on me. I'll be in the line. I'll be in line at a bookstore, at a Christian bookstore, buying, where's Captain Irony? I'll be there and thinking great thoughts, looking forward to what the minister's going to say in the sermon this coming Sunday, and suddenly somebody will bump me with their cart. And before I know it, I'm sitting there trying to think, good Christian, uplifting thoughts, and before I know it, I go, God damn it, watch it. And I think, oh, how horrible. And then you can say, well, why do you do that? Is that the first time you ever did it? And they go, well, no, certainly not. You go, well, if that's what's keeping you from being a Christian, why don't you stop it? And they got how many reasons? Can you count? It starts with an I, known as infinite number. But they will say things, the cruder the religious person, the more simplistic, they'll say things like, well, the forces of evil, or Lucifer, or Satan, making me do it, or they can just say the frailty of man, etc. No, it's not the frailty of man. After all, we're simply mortals. Yeah, we're going to die and rot. Well, what kind of excuse is that while you're alive? It sounds great to say, well, the frailty of man. But why is it that the guy went, watch it, and then says, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I know I shouldn't. And he says, well, it's that kind of frailty that keeps me from being a Christian. No, it's not. It's lack of intellectual control. Attention. If you had some kind of attention, if you could manipulate time the way that they manipulate the environment, somebody bump you, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to put it in words, somebody bump you in the cart, and you realize, well, I'd like to turn around and hit that son of a bitch, whoever it is. Well, assuming he's not a lot bigger than me, especially if it's a kid or a woman, I'll turn around and bust it. But at least I'll turn around. What I want to do is just me to try and say, watch what you're doing, damn it. But wait a minute. I spend a lot of time trying to be a Christian, and when I'm in the best mood and I read Christian thoughts and literature, it makes me feel good, and I'm sure that's what I should be doing, so why should I do that? Especially now I'm staying here, I'm not hurt, and why should I turn around? I've been through this enough, I'm going to turn around and say, won't you watch it? And I may turn around and it's a nun, or a little old grandmother, and then I'll feel even worse, so why do I bother? Out of all the times I've done this, how many times have I done this in life? Of course, if you're real attentive, you might actually know. You'd say, well, this will be the 4,700. But at least you know you've done it many times. Yeah. At least you know you've done it many times, and so there you stand, and you ask yourself, have I ever benefited? Have I in any way felt better? Now, this is all still going on. The person just bumped you, remember? And you say, well, certainly not. I, in fact, feel worse, because it goes against everything that I profess, everything I believe would take to be a Christian. And so then you think, well, I know what? I've got a concept. I won't do it. And you don't. At that moment, if being a Christian is not retaliating or treating your brother as yourself or loving your fellow man, the son of a bitch is a Christian. He succeeded. What did it take? And my description, as drug as it was, and I know that's not the way life seems to operate when you're looking at the world through three-dimensional polar-based run eyes, you don't think it operates that way. But I haven't done anything extraordinary. No one, no sane person, including religious people, could deny that. That, yeah, you're right. But then they say, well, yeah, but you can't do it. But don't look for some kind of metaphysical reason that is outside a closed system. The reason's right here. And I don't mean it's your frailty. But the reason is right in here, and it's quite simple. It is not supernatural. It's lack of control. That's getting pushy, I know. It sounds sort of easier to say lack of attention. If you could control your attention, if you could focus your attention, then you could be a Christian. Give me the rest of that shit about, well, the frailty of man, original sin. Yeah, right. And it's not just a Christian, of course, we've been through that. People can say, well, I can't be a good elk or a good mason. Whatever. It doesn't matter what. And you say, well, why? Because whatever the organization, or the American Philosophical Society, or the American Humanist Society, whatever it is that is something that aspires, or the American Library Lovers Supporters Association, something that aspires, or Boy Scouts, or anything that aspires, that has goals, that you listen, and without any doubt, if you're a sane person, that if you pursued it, if you were indeed a real Girl Scout, Boy Scout, that I would be a better person than I am now. And you think, yeah, but I can't do it all the time. I know it sounds silly, but you know you can't. It's just the way life is. If the structure itself, if the system is admirable enough, if society approves of it enough, that it has one or two, they usually have more than one rule. You know, it's even Christianity. They press Jesus, and they did in other religions. Like, well, come on, can you narrow it down to one thing? And so he said, all right, here it is. And he gave him one sentence. And they all went, well, because nobody wants to remember it. It's better to have 10 or 20. And you should know by now why. It's better to say, if you say, well, I want to be a Boy Scout, I always heard that you would be a better person than all of our great presidents and thinkers were Boy Scouts. And I go, yeah. And you go, what does it take? And they say, well, we only have one rule. That really puts it hobbles a would-be system from ever expanding and serving a great purpose. Because if you just got one thing, guilt flows too freely. Failure is too much in your face. But like if you got 10 things, they say, all right, now to be a Boy Scout are 10 important things. Because then, you understand, you can get lost in the shuffle up here. So that is what, not just Christianity, but that's what all organizations do. They have enough demands, just of all sorts, that there's always something that you can't do, but you don't end up with just your mechanical attention focused on that one thing. Like, well, you know, I failed and there's no way out. Because if you fail one commandment, like if you're trying to be a Christian, and you curse your neighbor, or you covet his wife, and you think, uh-oh, I'm coveting his wife again. And you think, but I didn't steal from him today. You know, so, There was one tonight, if you were listening, the guy pointed out that had been trying to pursue a mystical path, but he said, at least back when I was marching along just in stuff with my fellow cityites, at least back then, one thing that I am missing now was back then, you could accept failure as a success, which is exactly what I'm talking about now, if you can hear me. That if you got more than one, you can think, well, by God, I failed again. But, you know, I didn't fail all 10 at once, which passes for progress. Or you go back and fix something that you broke earlier. Well, boy, I feel like I really accomplished something today. I straightened out I put the bumper back on the rear of my car. Not pointing out that the only reason it was off was you was drunk and you backed into the side of your house Saturday night. And you go, yeah, but it feels like progress. That's fine. All of this, religion, philosophy, just trying to be a better human being. All of this entails one thing. It is the mind seeking, the intellect of man, seeking to bring itself under control. Now, I've been working up to this, is what I was playing around with Christianity or being religious, and the only thing lacking that keeps people from being a Muslim or a Jew or a Christian or anything of a higher aspiration on their part. The only thing that keeps them from it is a lack of alertness, a lack of attention. That's it. If you can see it. If you can't, it doesn't matter anyway, because it's just, you know, obviously patent blasphemy, if not bullshit. But that's not it. Yeah, no, it's much more complicated than that. I know. But what I want you to consider now is all of that is based upon the fact that the mind, once you just become civilized, if you're just ordinary and you're now part of civilization, you may never read a book on philosophy. You may not go to any religion. You may not do much of anything in life except, you know, try to stay out of jail, try to treat your family decent, just an ordinary guy. That is still you attempting to bring the intellect under some control. Because if you're civilized by the ordinary definition, then that means you have got all of that below. You've got the beavers in the basement under some control. You can kind of whip them or frighten them like, you'll go to jail. You better watch it. You know, you can't beat up on your son or daughter. You can't treat them like that. You can't throw your wife off the roof. So you're, in a sense, civilized for whatever reason, and you have that under control. The rest of it, whatever you do, just the minimal amount that you do to stay out of trouble, to be a middle-class person, to keep the IRS from coming and putting a lien on your house, to stop the thought police, the taste police, the good taste police from coming around your house and go, you come in with us just on general principle. Even at that lowest level, what you're involved with is you're attempting to bring the intellect under control. And of course, when I say you are, what part of you? It's not that, not thighs. It's the intellect now wants to bring itself under control. I took a long time just to say it outright, but that is what civilization is. That is where the general march of progress is going, as far as me putting a usable verbal description on the horizon of humanity. Is the intellect, shortly after it became operational, shortly after Adam and Eve left the garden. I can say shortly after they came out of caves. It went on for millions of years. It is going on now in you in a matter of years. Some people it goes on in a matter of minutes, and it can go back in you, in an individual, and take another million years in you in one lifetime. It just ebbs and flows, but in general, the whole march of humanity is going that the intellect, the more it marches, every day it exercises a little more control out there. And I exaggerate all the things about boredom and urban crime and the lack of space exploration any further. It's not that it's stopped, but you understand it's to the point now that life is almost a coast. You can just almost be born and make it up to your age 20 in the Western world and just about lay down and be carried the rest of the way. There is no challenge. You can just almost lay there on the sidewalk and not do anything, just open your mouth every now and then, and somebody will come by and go, I feel sorry. And they'll go buy you a sandwich and put it in your throat and hand it to you. What that represents is, well, look at your own life individually. At the ordinary level, there's very little challenge left. How do you explain people out running? How do you explain people getting off from work after 8 hours and going home, and they've spent part of their money? They've spent $100, $200 on fancy clothes, and they get out before dinner and go run. Run. Do you understand? Now it's considered exercise, sport, recreation. Man used to run. The reason you could run is so you could catch something to eat. Or conversely, to keep from being what something else ate. And now you got and run. It is almost, to ordinary people nowadays, circa 1994, and it's always been, by the way, relative in a sense at any given time. But it's almost now that life is a lock out there, that if you're not doing anything, man collectively is doing it to such a point that the control out there is just a given. There's almost no need to even worry about it anymore. It is now more than ever. It's been gradual. I always hesitate to say things like more than ever, because then I'm afraid somebody will turn on and think this is some apocalyptic fundamentalist religious show, because as soon as you say, but now, more than ever, because people immediately like that, because they're expecting more than ever is the end there. More than ever are things going down in the drain. It is more than ever, even collectively, obvious that man is seeking control over this. It's impossible. Do you realize what a beauty that is? Do you realize that this is not only, those of you that remember the story about how a cheap way to get a donkey to pull a cart is you sit in the cart back there, and you got a long stick that hangs out in front of the donkey with a string on it and a carrot. And you hold it, and it's like perpetual motion. That is, until, of course, the donkey dies of starvation. It is holding out a carrot. But in that sense, if you every now and then have a little carrot, and that's certain, especially if he goes out and helps you plow the carrot field. That's what you're raising. It's got carrots in the back of the wagon. And the only time you deem to pull it is to carry it down to the carrot market. But you primarily get him to run over chasing that which he helps grow. It's simply a closed system. Do you understand the beauty that man cannot bring the intellect under control, and therefore there is one area in which he will never be bored. There is one area in which he will never stop exploring. The NASA of the mind will never cut back, not collectively. The mind keeps going because it is a donkey, in a sense, going after a carrot that's tied to its own head. That the intellect can do things that are just absolutely astounding. That's why I was pointing out the organ transplants, going to the moon, all sorts of things. Just absolutely astounding that you could almost ask yourself, semi-rhetorically, is there any limit to what the mind can do? And intellectual people can sit around and go, well, if there is, I can't see what it is. And they're close. Well, they're telling the truth when they say they can't see where it is. That's like I didn't know I lived in a green apartment. What's that smell? What's that dragonish smell? Is the mind cannot see it. But the answer to even the rhetorical question about, well, is there any limit to what the mind can do? The answer is simply yes. I know they didn't actually ask me. And yes, there is. All right, I'll play. What is it? Comprehend itself, control itself. Ah, crap, I read that somewhere back in high school, doesn't it? Some kind of philosophy book, or you may have, but notice what effect it had. That is the one thing. The donkey will never stop. It can never. Now, I was saying control. In the past, the more common term would have been in the Western, well, even in Eastern thought and philosophy, the common sort, is that the mind, they usually end up with a strong hedge because it's normally coming from some systematized mystical tradition, and they cannot cut off all possible applicants for school. And so they usually hedge it like the mind is faced with a formidable problem in trying to ever comprehend itself. And it seems to have just enough ominous, ponderous feel to it, and yet it doesn't say that you can't absolutely do it. It just says the mind, in attempting to comprehend itself, is perhaps faced with the most Herculean, challenging task of its career. And you think, how true? I mean, if you think at all, just in the city level, you think, how true? But it sounds as though that they didn't say it can't be done. Because you did that, it's like you traveled all the way to apply to this Zen school or whatever the would-be mystical tradition is, and you say, it's come to my attention that this whole thing about being enlightened, of being a greater consciousness, is the mind actually trying to bring itself under its own control. And let's say for whatever reason, the guy there at the door of the monastery went, yeah, we've been thinking that same thing. Where we heard that. And you go, well, I hear you're the greatest school going. Have you guys figured out how to do it? And they go, well, hell no. It's not possible. Thought you knew that. And they go, well, would you like to join? Did you bring your money? You understand it's sort of adverse advertising. Yeah. Which, of course, we're not talking about some mystical school. We're talking about life has not pointed that out to man. If you want to get theological in a multi-dimensional sense, life could not point it out to man. Which, if you want to really get off the subject, is part of the damn near, there's no good word, but I'll go ahead, there's damn near pathetic, childish belief that the mind has in external forces, to wit, gods. And the belief that gods, a God, a Jehovah, some Brahmic creative force outside the system that has made the system can now go back and communicate. That if you live the right kind of life, or if you're selected through birth or through whatever reason, that Rama, creation itself, could come back to you, to somebody, and actually speak to you. That is, communicate with you. Anybody that believes that, by the way, and it doesn't have to be just religious, but I want you to see that is not possible. There is no info from without the system. In the system, you do not have to just simply look outside at night at the universe. You can stay in-house, go in a closet, lay down, or sit up. Instead of worrying about the universe and a telescope, if you'd like to save a few bucks, there is no info. The mind cannot control itself, or the mind cannot comprehend itself, or the normal intellect cannot tell itself that which it does not know. Which is, if you want to really get complex, why not? Is why the ordinary mind likes to believe in gods and likes to believe that, well, perhaps, was that a flying saucer? Did I hear voices last night? Sometimes, at first I used to think late at night, especially when I'd eat a lot, I used to think maybe it was my dead grandmother trying to send me a message. Now I thought maybe it was Sitting Bull's cousin who died with him. But now sometimes I hear the tone of voice and it seems to have almost a dramatic accent. And I know I never heard him, but I keep thinking, Gerder? Gerder? The whole idea of wanting to believe in gods is like an excuse, a substitute for the fact that it will not happen. That the mind, the intellect, is not going to comprehend itself, and that is one of the uses of the idea of a God. That is some info, some force outside the system being the intellect, not this universe. Many fundamentalist religionists, as you might or might not have thought about since the space exploration. The last 50 or 60 years, a lot of them had their hands full because it had been a fairly common belief, at least in the Western world, that heaven, God himself, it's not that long ago, actually lived up here. And I'm sure there's still people somewhere in Arkansas or the Appalachians or certain parts of Turkey who still believe that. But they believe that he actually lives in the clouds. You could go in nice fundamentalist churches all across this great country, the leading edge of civilization 50 years ago, and you'd find places, people who are literate, people with clothes on, walking upright, and there would actually be paintings they'd done, little drawings they'd done of showing God, like Blake used to do, of actually up there behind clouds. Except they didn't mean it as allegory. They didn't intend it as art. Is they actually, well, in the Bible you can find it in Quran and everywhere about in the heavens, because what are you going to do back then? If you say, well, God spoke to me, or there's a God somewhere that wants us to live so-and-so, and you never heard this, and you say, well, where is he? Well, what are you going to say? You're going to say, well, he lives at my house, because you can go over there and check. Or you say, well, he lives over in East St. Louis. You can go check. But you go, well, certainly God doesn't live here. And that almost makes sense. You think, well, you're right. Would God want to live in my neighborhood? Hell, I don't. And so you go, well, he is extraterrestrial. He is not part of the system. He made us, and then he stood back to see how we'd make out. At any rate, after they started sending up rockets, after planes could fly above the clouds, that's only been not that long ago that men actually get in balloons first, but in planes and fly way up in the clouds to the point they could only see the black sky. They flew around the planet, and they came back, and I don't know, but some preacher somewhere got hold of them. Or anyway, they announced, I didn't see a God in sight, not even an angel, nothing. But remember, the idea of the force being outside the system, of God being somewhere, what I want you to consider, what a usable substitute. Not that man did it, it's like the system to stay in balance had to. It's the mind itself, it's the intellect of man having to believe in something generally outside here because it cannot control itself. It cannot feed itself. It cannot, as they used to say, comprehend itself. So therefore the answer is what? There's always got to be a loophole, as legal theologians would say. There has to be an injection hole for the mold, for the plastic mold of all of our Ken and Barbie brains, of our intellect. And so one of the ways out is always God. Always been. Even those that are atheists. God's always the way out. The reason that they need the way out is the mind will never bring itself under control, the intellect will not, and therefore that is the one area that keeps changing. Nothing else on this planet, nothing in the three-dimensional world changes like man's mind. They now have the technology, the telescopes. I know that there are astounding things happen, that stars go from being actual stars into white dwarfs, and they explode, and they may turn into black holes. But that happens, every time it happens, it goes through the same sequence. And the first few times that cosmologists realized that, you could have said it first, 50 years ago, that, wow, God, that's astounding. You could say that is, that makes man look puny. Physically, yeah. But intellectually, no. Because they keep doing the same thing over and over. That's an astounding, it's a matter of thing, if we were close enough, it'd blow us up and all that. But remember, we're not talking about strength. We're talking about something that's at another level, man's intellect. And nothing in this universe they have ever seen, they never will see. Just if you want to know the truth. But no matter what cosmic phenomenon, no matter what geological, but whatever natural phenomenon will ever be seen by man, nothing matches once you see it. Nothing matches the progress, the change, the evolution, the change, if you understand change in the real sense, of man's intellect. Everything else is repetition. It can be astounding. It can be beautiful to see happen, once or twice. How many times can you watch a volcano? How many times can you run from it? How many times can you see a tornado? There's nothing outside of man's intellect that has the ability to change like man's mind. And its ultimate change is, its ultimate desire in its change is to control itself. And it can't, which is what mysticism is all about. Because the idea of calling it control, see, well, I called it control. What do I mean? I was about to attack them like, well, they misnamed it. Hell, I'm the one that said it. Well, I was taking up for you. I was either playing the devil's advocate or a trial attorney, whichever comes first. And someone said they thought I was partially right. But the whole idea of all dreams of some mysticism or some secret work, everything that people right now are involved, everything from psychedelic drugs, mind-altering drugs, to meditation, to fasting, to dancing, whatever they're attempting to do. It has always been what they're attempting to do is to bring the intellect itself, for the intellect of the person involved, to bring itself under control. But once you reach that point, that you have some understanding of it, control is a real, can a hand speak? Is a real, how about incorrect? It's not so much control, but it is of some use when you realize that that's exactly what drives you to try and do this. It's what drove Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, Confucius. It's what drives civilization at the very common, uninteresting level to a would-be mystic. That is just going at a certain tempo, but that is what is driving man collectively, is the intellect now attempting to bring itself under control. I say now, remember, it's always been true, but now. And that is what those attempting to become more conscious, to experience the enlightenment, the Buddhahood, the awakening, is just the intellect. Now, I'm not talking about the experience itself, but everything right up to that. What the mind, what the intellect is attempting to do is to bring itself under control, no matter what it's called. That's exactly what it is, nothing more, nothing any less. Except once you experience it, you mean control becomes like some wiggly fingers? A shrug? Paralysis. Some bad moonshine. Hey, I can't answer everything. Well, even if I could.